Nam, 27 years old, was born and raised in Vung Tau. He worked as a construction engineer and lived alone in a small house near the coastal road, less than a 10-minute walk from the sea. During the day, Nam was busy on site, and in the evenings, he often spent time alone, quietly working on unfinished blueprints. His life passed by peacefully until one rainy afternoon, when he encountered something he would never forget. That day, the sky was overcast, and strong sea winds blew as raindrops pattered on the tin roof. Nam had just parked his motorbike in front of his house when he heard the faint giggle of a child somewhere near the slope leading down to the beach. He frowned and looked around, then slowly called out, his voice a mix of curiosity and caution. "Who's there? It's raining hard, why are you playing out here?" Only the sound of waves answered him. The laughter from earlier had dissolved into the wind. A shiver ran down Nam's spine, but he still stepped down the earthen slope, where a few dense bushes blocked the view. As he got closer, he saw a child around 5 or 6 crouched on the wet ground. The child's clothes were soaked, hair clinging to the forehead, yet their face beamed with joy. Nam slowed his steps and bent down slightly, trying to reassure the child. "Hey kid, why are you here? Where are your parents? You're all wet, aren't you cold?" The child didn't reply, just tilted their head and looked at him, still smiling. Their eyes shone strangely bright in the gloomy afternoon light. Nam felt a slight unease, but his adult instincts wouldn't let him just walk away. He reached out a hand and gently said, "Come here, I'll take you up to my house or you'll catch a cold." The child tilted their head to the other side, then suddenly burst into a high-pitched giggle again. The sound rang out through the rain, but Nam felt a chill shoot down his spine. He stepped forward once more, but just then, a motorbike zoomed down the slope. The man riding it shouted, "Get out of the way. It's dangerous here." Startled, Nam quickly stepped aside, but when he turned back, the child was gone. Only the soggy ground and some muddy blades of grass remained. He stood frozen for a few seconds, heart pounding. The man on the bike had stopped, still wearing his helmet. His face looked alarmed. He stared at Nam, voice trembling. You saw it too?" Nam frowned, trying to stay calm. "Saw who? That kid just now? Where'd they go, do you know?" The man swallowed hard, lowering his voice. "There's no kid here anymore. A few years ago, right at this spot, a child slipped and fell into the sea during a storm. They searched for a week and never found the body." Nam stood stunned. His eyes drifted to the slope where the rain still flowed in cold streams. The sound of waves crashing seemed to scream through the wind. He suddenly felt the raincoat on his shoulders grow heavy, his back freezing, and the giggling still lingering somewhere close. He took a deep breath, shook his head, and told himself it was just a trick of the rain. But when he got home, there on the tiled floor outside his door were small, wet footprints, smudged with water, leading into the living room. Nam froze, back stiff, not daring to take another step. Ellipsis. He curled up on the sofa until late into the night, his mind replaying the image of those bright eyes and the smile in the rain over and over. Around midnight, the sea wind rose again, making the window panes rattle. In the howl of the wind and waves, Nam thought he heard someone softly calling his name from the front porch. He slowly walked over and opened the door. The empty road stretched out under the dim yellow street light. The cold sea breeze whipped against his face. No one was there, but when he looked down, he saw faint, wet footprints of a child on the doorstep. One more had just appeared before vanishing right before his eyes. Nam closed the door, leaning his back against the cold surface, his heart pounding, and in that moment, he knew for certain he was not alone tonight. The sea wind howled all night, wave after wave crashing against Nam's window, sounding like someone softly knocking. He sat on the chair, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet he didn't dare turn off the lights. The image of those small, wet childlike footprints remained etched in his mind. The next morning, sunlight streaming through the window startled him awake. The floor was dry, with no trace of anything unusual. Nam walked around the living room, trying to convince himself. He murmured, voice trying to reassure, maybe it was just a dream. I was probably too tired last night and imagined it all. But when he stepped out into the yard, he saw his pair of slippers, which he had left beside the door the night before, soaked through as if someone had worn them into the rain. The chill from the night before suddenly returned to his feet. Nam couldn't bear the ambiguity any longer. That morning, he decided to head down to a small cafe by the sea near the slope from the previous day to ask around. The cafe was tucked beneath a row of casuarina trees, the sea breeze cool but still carrying the scent of last night's rain. As Nam sat down, the elderly woman who owned the cafe came out. Her hair was streaked with gray, and her eyes were warm. She looked at him kindly and asked, "What would you like, young man? Something to eat or just coffee?" Nam nodded politely. "Just a glass of iced black coffee, please. May I ask, has anything ever happened near that slope over there?" The woman paused for a moment, her expression subtly changing as she poured the coffee. Her voice lowered. "Why are you asking? Were you down there last night?" Nam was caught off guard and began to recount. "Yes, last night, I saw a child sitting right at the slope. A man on a motorbike warned me and told me that a child had died there before. I don't know what to believe." The woman sighed and gazed toward the sea, where white waves crashed against the shore. "Yeah, last year, during a big storm, a young boy was playing near that slope and slipped into the sea. His family searched for days but never found the body. Since then, people say that on rainy nights, they've seen a child's figure wandering around down there." Nam fell silent. His coffee was still steaming, but his hands felt ice cold. He looked out toward the sea again, and the image of those shining eyes and the smile in the rain returned vividly. That afternoon, Nam went home early. He decided to inspect his yard and the front of his house. In a corner by the wall, he saw several round, muddy smudges, like child-sized footprints. His heart sank. As night fell, Nam tried to remain calm. He turned on every light in the house and left the TV running on mute. Around 11 o'clock, the wind howled louder. Then, from the porch, came the sound of a slow, deliberate knock-knock. Nam shivered and slowly approached the door. He didn't open it right away but bent down to peek through the gap. Under the dim yellow porch light was a small figure crouched, its back turned toward him. Nam trembled, his voice shaking. Who are you?" The tiny figure slowly turned its head. Deep, glossy black eyes gleamed strangely, and a radiant smile stretched across its face. Water dripped steadily from its hair onto the concrete floor. Nam instinctively took a step back. He tried to steady himself. Voice hoarse. "What do you want?" The child didn't speak. It simply raised one hand, pointing its index finger toward the slope. Then, like smoke in the wind, the figure faded away into the porch light. Nam stood frozen, sweat soaking the back of his shirt. Only one thought echoed in his mind. The child wanted him to go to the slope. But this time, beneath the vague fear was a strange, compelling urge. Nam knew he would have to go down there. Ellipsis. That night, with a flashlight in hand, Nam trembled as he slowly made his way down the wet, earthen slope. The sea waves crashed rhythmically. The wind carried something faint, like the giggling of a child. Tangled in a cold that cut to the bone, Nam trembled as he pointed his flashlight down the slope. The faint yellow beam reflected off the rainwater that hadn't yet dried, shimmering as if someone had just passed by. The sea wind blew fiercely, carrying a biting chill and the salty sting that seeped into his skin. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and stepped forward slowly. The sound of gravel and dry leaves crunching underfoot echoed clearly in the still night. As he neared the base of the slope where it met the shore, Nam suddenly heard the waves mingled with something else, very faint, like the sound of someone sobbing. He swallowed hard, tightened his grip on the flashlight, and took a few more steps. In the dim light, a small figure appeared near the water's edge. A child crouched there, back facing Nam, shoulders gently shaking as if crying. Nam stood about 10 meters away, heart pounding. He tried to steady his voice and gently called out, "Hey there, what are you doing out here? You're all wet. Come here with me." The child didn't respond. It slowly stood up, movements oddly deliberate. Then it turned its head, deep black eyes glowing strangely in the flashlight's beam. That radiant smile appeared again. But in that moment, Nam felt a cold shiver run down his spine. Instinctively, he stepped back. His voice shook as he spoke, more to himself than to ask. What do you want me to do?" The child said nothing. It simply raised a tiny hand and pointed toward the pitch-black sea. Then it turned around and walked straight into the waves, leaving no footprints on the sand. Nam stood in stunned silence. His instincts screamed not to follow. Yet his feet moved on their own. When the waves reached his ankles, he jolted and stepped back. The sea wind roared, waves crashing in white foam, but the child's figure had vanished completely. As if it had never been there. Nam remained motionless for a long time before heading home. On the way up the slope, his flashlight caught a trail of small footprints imprinted in the wet earth. They led straight toward his house. Ellipsis. That night, Nam couldn't sleep. The sound of waves against the window glass echoed like whispered voices. Around 3 a.m., a soft knock came at the bedroom window. Nam shot up, heart pounding. He approached the window and pulled the curtain aside. Under the dim yellow streetlight, a small figure stood in the yard, gazing up at him. Nam stammered, barely audible. Who are you?" The child still said nothing. It simply raised its hand and pointed toward the slope again, the motion slow and inviting. Nam stood frozen, his hand clutching the curtain tightly. He could feel, with chilling certainty, that he was being drawn into something far beyond his understanding. The next morning, Nam decided to visit the man on the motorbike who had warned him. After asking around, he found the man's home in a small seaside village. The man greeted him with a worried look. "I knew you'd come back to ask. My name's Kai. You saw him, didn't you?" Nam nodded, his tone serious. "Every night, he doesn't say a word, just smiles and points to the sea." Do you know anything more?" Kai was silent for a moment, then lowered his voice. "The boy's family used to live right at the top of that slope. They've moved away since. People say that ever since the boy drowned, his spirit has lingered there. They say he never moved on because when he fell into the sea, he was holding a toy, and no one ever found it." A cold chill crept up Nam's neck. He understood now why the child kept pointing toward the sea. Perhaps he was searching for something. That night, Nam brought a flashlight and a rope, determined to return to the sea when the tide was low. The waves lapped gently, moonlight shimmering across the water. As he stepped into the shallows, a soft giggle echoed right beside his ear. Nam flinched, spinning around. Right behind him stood the child, radiant smile, eyes gleaming under the moonlight. Nam trembled, but this time, he summoned all his courage and whispered, You want me to find something, don't you? Show me." The child tilted its head, the smile unchanged. Then it turned and began walking slowly along the shoreline, as if guiding the way. Nam took a deep breath and followed, the flashlight shaking in his hand. The sound of waves and wind blended together, but Nam could clearly hear his own footsteps on the damp sand. He followed the small figure along the beach, the flashlight beam sweeping across the wet sand. The waves crashed steadily, the air thick with salt and seaweed. His footsteps mingled with the rhythm of the surf, sounding eerily out of place. The child walked ahead, its tiny frame fading into the night. It never turned back, just kept moving slowly, its bare feet leaving no trace behind. Nam's voice trembled, hoarse from tension. Why did you bring me out here?" No reply, only the distant, chilling sound of giggles. Eventually, the child stopped at a sunken patch of sand, where the waves crashed more fiercely. It slowly turned its head, dark, hollow eyes fixed on Nam, then raised one finger and pointed directly at the ground. Nam hesitated. The flashlight followed the direction of the gesture. There, half buried in the wet sand, something yellow peeked through. He knelt down, hands trembling as he brushed the sand away. A small, weathered yellow rubber duck, one wing torn, emerged in the beam of light. Nam gasped, breathing hard. Is this your toy?" The child gave a small nod. For the first time, its smile faltered, eyes glistening like morning mist. Nam's hands shook as he held the rubber duck, looking up, but the child had vanished into the night, leaving only the roar of the waves and the wind in his ears. The next morning, Nam brought the rubber duck to a small temple on a nearby hill. He sought out the head monk, a kind, elderly man. Nam recounted everything that had happened, his voice still trembling. The monk listened quietly and then gently nodded. Child spirits often linger in the world of the living because of something they were attached to. You found it, burn incense and pray for his soul to be at peace. Once his heart is calm, he will move on. Nam looked at the old rubber duck, and a vague ache of sorrow stirred in his chest. That afternoon, Nam returned to the slope. He placed the rubber duck on a flat stone by the shore, lit an incense stick, and silently prayed, "I don't know your name, but I hope you can rest now. Don't be lost here anymore." The sea wind blew hard. The incense smoke rose in a thin line and drifted out toward the water. Nam closed his eyes, a sense of relief slowly spreading through his chest. But when he opened them, the child appeared again by the water's edge. He stood still, the wind tossing his hair, wearing a gentle smile, his eyes no longer eerie as before. Nam gave a slight nod, his voice trembling but calmer. "Go on now." The child nodded, then turned and walked toward the sea. His figure faded into the salty mist until it disappeared completely. Nam stood still for a long time, listening to the wind and waves merge. He thought everything had come to an end. Ellipsis. That night, Nam fell asleep in a sense of peace. But around midnight, a rattling knock echoed at the door. He jolted awake, heart racing. When he stepped into the living room, the floor was soaked with seawater. And on that thin layer of water, illuminated by the faint yellow light, a small child's footprint appeared, then slowly faded. Nam stood frozen. In the stillness, a whisper sounded right by his ear, as if carried on the wind. "Uncle, help me." This time, the voice wasn't the giggling child's from before, it was trembling. Frightened, Nam shivered. He realized things were far from over. The whispered, "Uncle, help me," kept echoing in Nam's head, though the room was silent save for the ticking clock and distant waves. He stood in the center of the living room, the floor icy beneath his feet. Nam swallowed hard, his voice shaky. You haven't gone yet? What do you want me to do?" No answer, only the sound of wind through the door crack and the distant murmur of the sea. Nam took a deep breath, picked up the flashlight from the table, and stepped onto the porch. The night was pitch black, and the sea wind howled. When his flashlight swept across the yard, he gasped. On the concrete ground was a trail of small, wet footprints leading straight to the gate. Trembling, he followed. Every step felt heavy, like he was walking deeper into a strange dream, where the line between reality and illusion grew terrifyingly thin. Ellipsis. The trail of footprints led down the familiar slope. A crescent moon cast a pale light on the surface of the sea. Near the water's edge, Nam saw the child again. This time, he wasn't smiling. His head was bowed, shoulders shaking as if in fear. Nam called out, his voice softer than ever. "What do you want me to do?" The child slowly raised his head, his eyes brimmed with tears, and in a whisper carried by the wind, he said, "Uncle, find my friend? My friend is still down there." Nam felt a chill run down his spine. He blinked, stammering, Your friend? In the sea?" The child nodded slowly. Then he pointed toward a rocky outcrop farther out. His tiny finger quivered in the moonlight. Then he gradually faded into the salty mist. Like smoke, Nam stood motionless for a long time. So the child hadn't just wanted his toy. He'd been trying to ask for help for someone else. Nam swallowed hard, deciding that the next morning, when the tide went out, he would return to check that rocky outcrop. Ellipsis. The next morning, Nam went to see Mr. Kai, the man from before. He told him everything that had happened during the night. Mr. Kai's face turned pale. Could it be there was another child? Last year, everyone only knew about the one boy who went missing. But on the day it happened, there were rumors he'd been playing with another kid. The other family stayed silent, never reported anything. Nam was shocked. Why wouldn't they report it? Mr. Kai sighed. The village was in an uproar back then. People said that family feared shame, and they moved away right after the storm. No one really knew. Nam felt a heavy weight in his chest. He couldn't sit still. That afternoon, when the tide was low, he brought a flashlight, rope, and a metal hook, and waded out toward the rocky outcrop the child had pointed to. The waves crashed hard, and the smell of seaweed was overpowering. Beneath a jagged rock crevice, he spotted something wedged tight. Nam bent down and used the hook to pull it free. A small backpack, torn and rotted, its zipper rusted, emerged from the water. Nam's heart pounded. He opened it. Inside was a broken plastic doll, half its face missing, and a decayed piece of a child's shirt. A chill ran down his back. He remembered the whisper, "Help me," and the small hand pointing to the sea. There truly had been another child. Ellipsis. That night, Nam placed the backpack and the doll on the table. Lighting a candle beside them, he whispered a prayer, then sat back in his chair, exhausted. Around midnight, the room grew cold. From the porch, a child's voice floated in, not joyful, but choked with sorrow. "Uncle, save my friend?" Nam looked up. On the porch stood two small figures side by side. One was the familiar boy with the gentle smile. The other was thinner, with long, wet hair, face blurred in the dim light. Nam trembled, but this time, he wasn't afraid. He spoke gently, his voice low. "I'll help both of you. Don't be afraid." The two small figures nodded slightly, then faded into the darkness, leaving only the distant sound of waves. Nam understood now, this wasn't over. Somewhere beneath that slope, a secret still lingered, and until it was uncovered, those small souls would never find peace. The next morning, the Vung Tau sunlight spilled across Nam's porch, but he still felt cold to the bone. The image of the two children standing at his doorstep lingered in his mind. He knew he couldn't ignore this anymore. Nam hastily made a cup of coffee, took a few sips, and headed to Mr. Kai's house. The moment Kai saw him, he asked with worry in his voice, "Did they appear again last night?" Nam nodded and spoke slowly. "This time, there were two. One unfamiliar, thin, with long hair. I found a backpack with a doll and a piece of a child's shirt in the rocks. I'm sure another child died there too." Kai fell silent for a moment, then lowered his voice. "I remember now? That rainy night. Some women in the neighborhood said the family reported only one missing child. But someone saw two children playing at the slope. The other family, I think they were distant relatives of the first. After that, they disappeared without a trace." Nam asked urgently, his tone tense. "Do you remember where they moved?" Kai furrowed his brow, trying to recall, then said softly, "I heard they moved toward Ba Ria, somewhere in the old fishing village, but I don't know exactly." Nam was quiet for a while. He felt the weight of this story growing heavier. Two child spirits still hadn't found peace, and behind them was a family secret full of shadows. Ellipsis. That afternoon, Nam rode his motorbike along the coastal road toward Ba Ria. The sea wind roared in his ears, but his mind was consumed by the image of those children's eyes in the night. After asking around, he finally found a dilapidated wooden house in a quiet fishing village. A middle-aged woman stepped out, her face weathered with hardship. Nam politely greeted her. "Hello ma'am, I'd like to ask, did your family once live near the slope by the sea in Vung Tau?" The woman paused, her gaze shifting away. Why are you asking about that?" Nam took a deep breath and briefly explained what he had seen. He ended firmly, "Your son still hasn't found peace. I saw both children." The woman trembled, her eyes filling with tears. "Oh my God, he still hasn't moved on?" She covered her face and sobbed. After a while, she began to speak. That day, the two children, relatives, had been playing at the slope. When the rain poured, one child slipped into the sea. The other tried to pull him back, and fell in too. The family, fearing shame, reported only one missing. They believed the tide had carried both away. Nam felt a deep heaviness in his chest. He looked at the woman, his voice firm but compassionate. "You should at least hold a ceremony to pray for them. Those poor children, they're still trying to find their way home every night." She nodded, tears falling. Will you help me? Ellipsis. The following afternoon, Nam and the woman brought incense and offerings to the slope. The sky was tinged with late afternoon gold, and the sea breeze was soft and melancholy. Nam placed the doll and the backpack on a stone by the water, then lit the incense. The woman knelt beside him, hands trembling in prayer. Through choked sobs, she prayed, "My child, please forgive your parents, forgive our family. May you go in peace?" The wind picked up, and the incense smoke curled into a thin spiral. Drifting out to sea, Nam looked toward the waves, and saw two small figures standing side by side, holding hands. One smiled gently, the other bowed its head shyly. Nam whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "Go on, little ones, you are not forgotten." The two figures slowly faded into the golden twilight, disappearing into the sea breeze. Nam stood silently for a long while, his heart still heavy but somehow more at ease. Ellipsis. That night, Nam thought he would finally sleep soundly. But just past midnight, a soft rattling knock came at the door. He jolted upright, stepping out onto the porch. Pale moonlight illuminated the empty yard. No one was there, but on the concrete, a thin stream of water had formed, twisting into lines like writing. Nam bent down, his eyes widening. In the smeared water, someone had hastily scrawled 3 words. "Not over yet." A cold gust of wind swept past, and Nam froze. He realized the story was far from finished. All night, Nam tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The image of those 3 words, "not over yet," burned in his mind like a whisper beside his ear. The chill from last night's damp cement still clung to his feet. He knew, without a doubt, that even though he had helped the 2 children find their belongings and performed a prayer ritual, something dark remained unresolved. The next morning, Nam went to see Mr. Kai and told him everything. After hearing it, Kai frowned. "That's strange. The 2 kids have already passed on. Why leave a sign like that? Maybe someone else is involved in this." Nam sat in deep thought, eyes gazing out at the sea. "You might be right. They only covered up one child's death. But why fear shame that much? Kids playing by the slope, it's not unusual." Kai sipped his tea and spoke slowly. "Back in that fishing village, there were a lot of superstitions. I heard that on the day the kids went out to play. A few people were setting nets by the shore. Some villagers claimed they saw an adult leading the children toward the rocky outcrop, then leaving." Nam's spine tingled. "You mean, it wasn't just an accident?" Kai nodded slightly, his eyes shadowed. "Maybe, I can't say for sure. But there were rumors that some families believed in stealing a child's spirit for good fortune in business." Nam shuddered. He remembered the times the child had appeared, sometimes with a radiant smile, sometimes trembling with fear. If adults were involved, perhaps the children had witnessed something terrifying before their deaths. Ellipsis. That afternoon, Nam decided to return to the rocky outcrop during low tide. This time, he went alone, bringing a flashlight and his phone. Waves lapped softly, and the setting sun cast golden light across the sand. As he reached the water's edge, Nam bent to inspect the rocky crevice again. Suddenly, a strange sound came from behind. He spun around. On the slope stood a man, silently watching him. The sunlight sliced across his face, shadowing half of it, but his eyes gleamed with unease. The man spoke in a raspy voice. "Why do you keep digging up the past?" Nam tightened his grip on the flashlight, trying to stay calm. "I just want the children to be at peace." "Who are you?" The man didn't answer. He took a few steps down the slope, his voice dropping. "Some things are best left buried. Some deaths are destiny." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the fishing village. Nam stood frozen, a deep sense of dread rising in him. Someone clearly wanted to keep something hidden. Ellipsis. That night, a strong wind blew through the town. Waves crashed against the seawall in a relentless rhythm. Around 1 a.m., the sound of children giggling echoed outside Nam's bedroom window. He jolted awake and pulled the curtain aside. Under the pale silver moonlight, 2 children stood near the porch. This time, besides the smile and the sadness in their eyes, they both raised a finger to their lips, motioning for silence, then pointed toward the slope. Nam trembled but understood it was a sign. He grabbed his raincoat, flashlight, and rushed out into the stormy night. When he reached the bottom of the slope, the sight before him chilled him to the core. On the shimmering wet sand were footprints, both adult and child, leading straight to the water's edge. The wind howled in his ears. The waves crashed like pounding heartbeats. For a fleeting moment, Nam thought he heard children crying from deep beneath the sea. He stood rooted to the spot, overwhelmed by dread. He knew he had uncovered a truth someone desperately wanted to bury. And if he kept going, there would be no turning back. The night sea wind lashed against Nam's face with a biting chill. But what made him tremble more was the fear crawling through every fiber of his body. He followed the flashlight beam along the trail of footprints leading to the water's edge. Deep impressions of adult feet marked the wet sand, interspersed with tiny child-sized footprints. Nam swallowed hard, his voice lost in the wind. "Uncle Kai, you were right? It wasn't just an accident." He walked along the water's edge. The waves crashed noisily, and the moon was veiled by clouds, casting everything in a hazy light, like an old memory unfolding before his eyes. At the point where the footprints faded into the sea, something glinted under the flashlight. Nam bent down and picked it up. It was a tiny, dented silver bracelet. Inside, a single letter was engraved, T. Nam clenched the bracelet tightly, a chill running down his spine. He sensed this belonged to the second child. Just then, a rustling sound came from behind. Nam spun around. On the slope, in the pale moonlight, stood the same man he had met the day before. His eyes heavy, voice raspy. "You shouldn't hold on to that." Nam gripped the bracelet tightly, his voice hard. "Who are you? Were you involved in the deaths of those two children?" The man was silent for a moment, then stepped down a few steps. The wind tossed his disheveled hair. His voice dropped, as if mingled with the crashing waves. "I was just following someone else's request. That night, I was asked to lead the two kids out to the rocky point. I didn't expect the storm to be that bad." Nam stood frozen, his fingers numb. He asked, voice hoarse. "Asked, by who?" The man lowered his head. "The grandmother of one of the boys. She believed that taking a child's spirit would bring prosperity to the family business. I thought I was just taking them to the edge so she could say a prayer. I didn't expect the waves to take them." Nam's feet felt icy cold. All the giggling, the sorrowful gazes in the night, the wet footprints on his floor, it all stemmed from the injustice of two children used as offerings for blind superstition. The man trembled, looking at Nam and whispering, I still hear them in my dreams, for over a year now. Please, help them?" Nam clutched the bracelet tightly. He knew the truth had to come to light. But first, he had to complete the farewell ritual for those innocent souls. Ellipsis. That night, Nam lit incense in his home. The smoke curled in thin tendrils toward the window. Outside, the sound of small footsteps echoed on the porch. He stepped out, his voice trembling but steadier than before. "I know everything now. I promise I'll help you rest in peace." Two small figures appeared under the moonlight. This time, they didn't smile. They stood still, their eyes filled with gratitude. The thinner child raised a hand, pointing at the silver bracelet in Nam's palm. Nam lifted the bracelet, speaking softly. It's yours, isn't it? Tomorrow I'll bring it to the temple, along with the doll and the rubber duck. I promise, no one will forget you again." The two figures slowly faded. A cold breeze swept by, the incense smoke spiraling and dissolving into the night. Ellipsis. But before Nam could step back inside, a loud thud echoed from the base of the slope, like a large rock collapsing. Alarmed, he rushed to the edge of the hill. In the dim moonlight, a patch of earth had collapsed, revealing the rotted frame of a small boat buried beneath the sand. Nam's heart pounded. He realized that what the children had been leading him to wasn't just the place they fell, but where the boat had once been anchored for the spirit-stealing ritual. A chill gripped him. This story clearly wasn't over. The sea wind howled in his ears as Nam stood frozen, staring at the decayed boat revealed by the sunken earth. The faint moonlight reflected off the shattered wood, shimmering like an eye opening from the past. He shakily aimed his flashlight. On the side of the boat, flakes of red paint still clung to the surface. Inside the aged hull, rainwater and sand had turned to thick sludge. But what made Nam choke up were the frayed rope marks across the beams, once used to hold something in place. Nam whispered to himself, This is where they performed the ritual." A cold wind blew across his neck. In that moment, he heard the faint sound of children giggling from inside the boat, mixed with the vague sound of sobbing. Nam took a deep breath and climbed down to inspect. His flashlight swept across the interior and stopped on a broken ceramic jar buried in the mud. He picked it up, rinsed it with seawater, and saw inside several red strings and a scrap of paper with faded Chinese characters. Nam's voice trembled in the wind. They really performed a binding ritual? He turned and saw Uncle Kai standing at the top of the slope, holding a flashlight, his face filled with worry. Uncle Kai called down, his voice shaky. "Nam, be careful. That place. No one from the fishing village dares go near it." Nam climbed out of the boat, his voice low but firm. "I have to finish this. Only when we bring all of this to the temple will the children truly be at peace." Ellipsis. The next afternoon, Nam gathered everything: the rubber duck, the broken doll, the dented silver bracelet, the ceramic jar with red string, and the old paper. He placed them all into a small wooden box. As the sun began to set, Nam and Uncle Kai brought the box to the hilltop temple. The head monk looked at the items with deeply sorrowful eyes. The monk spoke slowly. "Spirits of children who died unjustly, if not fully released, will become wandering souls. They don't blame anyone, but the living must repay their karmic debts. Tonight's ceremony will lift part of that burden." Nam knelt beside the altar. As the monk chanted, the wind howled across the hilltop. The temple bell echoed into the darkness. In the flickering candlelight, Nam caught a glimpse of two small figures behind the monk, one smiling gently, the other bowing their head. He whispered, voice steady and warm, "Go now, little ones. No one will harm you anymore." The two figures slowly faded, the incense smoke drifting toward the distant sea. Nam's chest felt lighter, as if a heavy stone had finally been lifted. Ellipsis. That night, Nam returned home, thinking everything had finally come to an end. He showered, drank a cup of hot tea, and lay down to rest. Outside, the waves still whispered, but somehow more softly than before. He was dozing off when he heard a faint click on the porch. Nam sat up abruptly. This time, there were no giggles or crying, no sudden chill. He stepped onto the porch. On the dry cement ground, a trail of tiny wet footprints appeared. They circled the yard once, then stopped right in front of the door. As if saying goodbye, Nam stood silently, saying nothing. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and lingering incense. The footprints faded, then vanished completely. He took a deep breath and quietly walked back inside. He knew this was the final farewell from the small souls. Ellipsis. But just as he closed the door to his room, a soft sound echoed from the shore, like the rhythm of wooden oars striking water. Nam froze. He realized, maybe that decayed boat hadn't completely settled beneath the sand. And out at sea, the night tide still whispered secrets left untold. That night, Nam couldn't sleep. The sound of wooden oars dipping into the waves echoed faintly in the distance, sometimes clear, sometimes fading, as if drifting in from another realm. The sea wind whistled through the window cracks, carrying a salty chill that made the little house on the hillside shiver in the silence. Nam put on his coat, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped onto the porch. The sky was dim and cloudy, the crescent moon hiding behind a veil of mist. He strained to listen. The sound of oars continued rhythmically, keeping pace with the nighttime waves. He whispered to himself, "It can't be anyone, the sea's rough tonight. No one would be rowing out there." Nam followed the familiar slope down to the beach. The smell of salt and seaweed filled his nose. The damp sand was icy beneath his feet. Under the flashlight beam, the surface of the sea rippled with silvery glints. And far out, a faint wooden boat drifted lazily. He froze. It was the same decayed boat he had seen buried halfway in the sand during the day. But now, it floated out at sea as if it had never rotted, its glossy hull reflecting the pale moonlight. From the boat, a child's voice rang out, pure, yet chilling. "Uncle, come out here?" Nam trembled, his hands gripping the flashlight tightly. But then, he slowly stepped toward the water's edge, letting the waves lap over his cuffs. In that moment, a faint scent of incense from the temple hill seemed to waft in, mingling with the salty breeze. The boat turned its bow toward him. On the deck, the two children stood close together, one with a gentle smile, the other thinner, clutching the broken doll tightly. They waved softly, their eyes glistening, as if trying to say something. Nam stood still. He didn't step into the water. He only bowed his head deeply, voice low and hoarse in the wind. "Go now, little ones, no one will ever hurt you again." The sound of oars echoed steadily. The boat turned away, drifting slowly toward the misty horizon. The waves blended with the rhythm of the oars until all sounds melted into the night. Nam stood there alone for a long time, hearing only the beat of his own heart and the whisper of the sea. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting a soft glow across the rippling sand. There were no more footprints, no more laughter, no more lingering cold. He turned and climbed the slope. Each step felt like leaving behind a silent, haunting emptiness. In the sky above, wisps of clouds stretched thin like the final trails of incense smoke, drifting slowly toward the distant sea. The wooden door closed gently behind him. In the windswept silence of the Vung Tau night, everything faded into stillness. Out at sea, the waves still whispered, like a silent film that had never truly ended.